The sun hammered down on the cracked earth like a blacksmith's forge, turning the air into a shimmering haze that blurred the line between sky and sand. Eliza lay sprawled in the dust of the trading post yard, her wrists bound tight with coarse rope that had long since rubbed her skin to weeping sores. The taste of salt and iron filled her mouth, sweat mixed with the blood from her split lip. Flies buzzed around her like dark omens, landing on her matted hair, her torn calico dress stiff with grime. The world spun in slow, nauseous circles. She hadn't drunk water since dawn, hadn't eaten in days. The men from the caravan had dragged her here, bartering her like a lame horse, but no one bid worth one meal. Maybe one had spat, his tobacco-stained teeth flashing in a grin. If you're starving, they'd cut her loose from the wagon, but left her tied to a stake, figuring the coyotes or the heat would finish what they started. Now the post was empty. The traders gone with a falling light, and the wind howled through the skeletal remains of an old corral, carrying only the scent of sagebrush and distant rain that never came. Her breath came in shallow rasps, each one a fight against the weight pressing on her chest. The ground beneath her was hard as bone, baked to a brittle crust that flaked away under her fingers as she clawed weakly at the rope. No use. Her arms ached from the effort, from the memories that flooded in unbidden, the feel of her mother's hands slipping away in the fevered dark of their sod house back in Kansas. The rough grip of the men who'd come for the debt after Pa died. She'd been 12 then, bartered off to settle accounts, passed from hand to hand like a worn coin. Each time, the value dropped. Now this, abandoned in a nameless speck of New Mexico territory, where the mountains loomed like indifferent gods, purple and jagged against the bleeding sunset. A shadow flickered across her face, and she flinched, expecting a boot or a whip. But it was only a raven, hopping closer on the fence rail, its black eyes gleaming with curiosity, or hunger. She closed her eyes, willing the dizziness to pass, but it only deepened, pulling her back to fragments of the past. The wagon train out of Missouri, wheels groaning under the weight of hopes that turned to dust. Her first owner, a miner with calloused hands and a voice like gravel, who'd beaten her for spilling coffee, then sold her on when the claim went dry. Then the freighters who chained her to cook and mend, their laughter echoing in the nights as they drank around the fire. Girls got spirit, one had said once, almost kindly, before the whiskey turned mean. Spirit, what was left of it now? Just this hollow ache, this thirst that clawed at her throat like thorns. The raven cawed a harsh scrape against the silence, and Eliza forced her eyes open. The light was fading, the sky streaked with bruised oranges and purples. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped, answered by another. Her heart stuttered. Night would bring cold, and worse. She tugged at the rope again, the fibers biting deeper, but her strength ebbed like water into sand. A tear tracked down her cheek, hot and useless, evaporating before it hit the ground. The world didn't care, it never had. The plains stretched, endless, swallowing lives whole, leaving only bones bleached white under the relentless sun. Hoofbeats faint at first, like a dream, then growing steadier, thudding against the earth. Eliza lifted her head, dust caking her lashes. A rider emerged from the haze, a silhouette against the dying light hole in the saddle, coat flapping like wings. He reined in his horse a few yards away, the animal snorting and pawing the ground. The man dismounted slowly, boots crunching on the gravel, his shadow falling long over her. She couldn't make out his face, backlit as he was, but she smelled leather and sweat, the faint tang of tobacco. He stood there a moment, unmoving, as if weighing something invisible. Then he crouched, his voice low and rough, like wind over stone. "Easy now, ain't here to hurt you." She didn't respond, couldn't. Her throat was too dry, her mind too fogged with fear and exhaustion. He pulled a canteen from his saddlebag, uncorked it and held it to her lips. Water trickled cool and sweet, spilling over her chin as she gulped it down. It hit her stomach like a stone, but she drank anyway, greedy for the life it promised. When he pulled it away, she gasped, meeting his eyes for the first time, gray as storm clouds, lined with the kind of weariness that came from too many miles, too many losses. A cowboy by the look of him, weathered hat, scarred hands, a revolver holstered at his hip. But there was no cruelty in his gaze, only a quiet assessment, like he was seeing not just her body, but the broken pieces inside. He glanced at the rope, then drew a knife from his boot. The blade flashed in the twilight as he cut her free, the fibers parting with a soft snap. Her wrists burned as blood rushed back, but she didn't cry out, just rubbed them, staring at him, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. "Name's Jack," he said simply, sheathing the knife. Saw the traders leave, figured someone might be left behind. He didn't ask her name, didn't demand thanks. Just helped her to her feet, steadying her when her legs buckled like a newborn foal's. The horse nickered softly, and Jack led her toward it, his arm firm around her waist. The wind picked up again, swirling dust around them, but for the first time in days, it didn't feel like an enemy. As they rode into the gathering dark, the trading post shrinking behind, Elisa leaned against his back, the rhythm of the horse's gait lulling her frayed nerves. Questions swirled in her mind. Who was he? Why help? But they dissolved in the exhaustion washing over her. For now, there was only the warmth of another body, the vast night sky wheeling above, stars pricking through like distant promises. Asterisk, asterisk, the night closed around them like a fist, the air sharp with the scent of sage and cooling earth. Eliza clung to Jack's coat as the horse plodded through the dark, each step a jolt through her aching body. The stars burned cold overhead, a vast, indifferent map that offered no direction. Her wrists throbbed where the rope had bitten, and her stomach twisted, empty but for the water that sloshed uneasily inside her. Jack didn't speak, didn't turn to check on her. His silence was a weight, not unkind but heavy, as if he carried his own ghosts that pressed against the night. The only sounds were the creak of the saddle, the horse's steady hoofbeats, and the faint howl of wind threading through the distant mesas. Her mind drifted unmoored by exhaustion, slipping back to memories she'd tried to bury. A winter night in Kansas, the wind rattling the sod-house walls, her mother's fevered whispers fading into silence. Eliza had been 9, too small to understand death but old enough to feel its claws. Pa had followed 2 years later, coughing blood into a rag, his eyes hollow as he told her to be strong. Strong, the word tasted bitter now, like the dust she'd swallowed on the trail. Strength hadn't saved her when the debt collectors came, hadn't kept her from being traded like livestock. She saw flashes of faces, men with greedy hands, women who looked away. The preacher who'd called her cursed when she wouldn't cry for mercy. Each memory was a stone in her chest, piling higher until she could barely breathe. The horse slowed, and Eliza blinked, pulled back to the present. They'd stopped in a shallow draw, sheltered by a cluster of twisted junipers. The ground was soft with sand, the air cooler here, tinged with the faint sweetness of creosote. Jack slid from the saddle, his boots crunching as he hit the ground. He offered a hand, and she took it, her legs trembling as she dismounted. The world swayed, and she gripped his arm, her fingers digging into the worn leather of his sleeve. He didn't flinch, just steadied her until she found her balance. "Sit," he said, nodding toward a flat rock half buried in the sand. She sank onto it, the cold seeping through her dress, grounding her. He built a fire with quick, practiced movements, coaxing flame from a handful of dry sticks. The light flickered over his face, etching lines deeper than his years, maybe 30, maybe older. His hands were scarred, knuckles rough from fights or labor, but they moved with care as he pulled a tin of beans from his saddlebag and set it to warm. The smell hit her like a blow, her mouth watering so fiercely it hurt. He didn't offer it right away, just stirred the fire, letting the silence stretch. When he finally handed her the tin, warmed and dented, she took it with shaking hands, scooping the beans with her fingers. The taste was earthy, sweet, life itself, and she ate too fast, choking a little. Jack watched, his gray eyes unreadable, but he didn't rush her, didn't speak. When the tin was empty, scraped clean, she set it down, wiping her hands on her dress. The fire's warmth was a small mercy, but it couldn't touch the cold inside her. "Why?" she croaked, her voice raw from disuse. He raised an eyebrow, leaning back against a juniper trunk. "Why help me?" she pressed, the words scraping her throat. "You don't know me. I ain't worth nothing." He looked at her then, really looked, and something flickered in his face. Grief, maybe, or recognition. "Worth's got nothing to do with it," he said, voice low. "We saw you there, tied up like a dog, didn't sit right." He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the dark. "Ain't always about what you're worth. Sometimes it's just about what's right." She stared at him, searching for the lie, the hidden cost. Men didn't help for nothing, she'd learned that long ago. But his gaze held steady, no hunger in it, no expectation, just that weariness, like he'd seen too much and carried it. She wanted to ask more, to dig into the why of him, but her eyelids grew heavy, the fire's warmth pulling her toward sleep. He tossed her a blanket from his pack, rough but clean, and she wrapped it around herself, curling up on the sand. The junipers whispered in the wind, their branches clawing at the stars. For the first time in years she didn't dream of running. When morning came, the sky was pale as bone, the sun a faint glow behind a veil of clouds. Jack was already up, saddling the horse, his movements quiet but deliberate. Eliza stirred, the blanket slipping from her shoulders, the ache in her body dulled, but not gone. She watched him, this stranger who'd given her water, food, a moment's safety. The question hung unspoken. What now? He glanced at her as if sensing it, and jerked his head toward the horse. "Town's a day's ride. Got a friend there, runs a boarding house, she'll take you in, no questions." His tone was matter-of-fact, but there was a softness underneath, like he knew the weight of what he offered. She nodded, throat tight, and stood, brushing sand from her dress. The draw felt smaller in the daylight, the junipers less like guardians and more like weary sentinels. As they mounted and rode out, the land unfolded before them, vast and unyielding, the mountains sharp against the horizon. Eliza's hands gripped the saddle, her heart caught between fear and something new, something fragile, hope, maybe, or just the absence of despair. Asterisk, asterisk, the ride dragged on through the heat of the day, the sun climbing high and merciless, turning the air into a thick, wavering curtain. Eliza's hands ached from gripping the saddle horn, her thighs chafed raw against the leather. The horse's flanks foamed with sweat, its breath coming in heavy snorts that matched the pounding in her temples. Jack rode easy, his body swaying with the animal's rhythm, but she felt every jolt, every stone underfoot like a reminder of her frailty. The land rolled out in waves of scrub and rock, dotted with yucca spears that clawed at the sky, their blooms long withered. Dust coated her tongue, gritty and metallic, and she swallowed against the thirst that never fully left. Town appeared like a mirage, at first a cluster of adobe. Buildings huddled against the dry wash, their walls cracked and sun-bleached. A few horses tied outside a saloon, a dog slinking through the shadows, its ribs sharp under mangy fur. The air carried the faint stink of manure and wood smoke, mixed with the sharper tang of whiskey spilling from open doors. Jack reined in at a two-story boarding house, its sign creaking in the breeze. Mrs. Harlan's rooms and meals. He dismounted, boots thudding on the packed earth, and helped Eliza down. Her legs nearly gave, but she caught herself, refusing to lean too hard. Pride, or what was left of it, burned in her chest like a coal. Inside, the air was cooler, heavy with the scent of baking bread and lye soap. Mrs. Harlan was a stout woman with gray-streaked hair pulled tight in a bun, her eyes sharp as flint but not unkind. She glanced at Eliza's torn dress, the bruises blooming on her arms, and clucked her tongue. "Lord, child, you look half dead. Room upstairs, bathwater's hot, no questions." Just a nod to Jack, who murmured something low about owing her one. Eliza followed the woman up the stairs, each step creaking underfoot, the wood worn smooth by countless feet. The room was sparse, a narrow bed with a quilt faded from too many washings, a basin on a stand, a single window overlooking the street, but it was clean, private, a space that didn't feel like a cage. She sank into the tub later, the water stinging her wounds before it soothed, steam rising like ghosts from the surface. Soap scraped away layers of dirt, revealing skin pale and mottled with old scars. Her reflection in the basin's edge was a stranger, hollow cheeks, eyes shadowed with purple. Memories surged again, unbidden. The auction block in Santa Fe. Men circling like vultures, bidding low because she was used goods. The freighter who'd won her with a sack of flour and a bottle of rot gut, his breath hot on her neck as he claimed his prize. She'd fought at first, nails raking flesh, but hunger and cold had broken that fire. Now, here, in this quiet room, she wondered if it could flicker back. Jack's face flashed in her mind, those gray eyes, the way he'd cut the rope without a word. What did he want? Freedom didn't come free. Downstairs, supper was beans and cornbread, served on tin plates that clattered against the scarred table. Jack sat across from her, hat on his knee, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar to reveal a silver chain glinting against tanned skin. Mrs. Harlan bustled about, humming an old hymn, leaving them in a bubble of silence. Eliza ate slowly, savoring the warmth spreading through her, but her gaze kept drifting to him. "You got kin here?" she asked finally, voice steadier now. He shook his head, forking beans with deliberate care. "Nope, just passing through. Herd cattle when I can, drift otherwise." His tone was even, but there was a hitch, a shadow crossing his face like a cloud over the moon. She waited, and after a beat he added, "Lost my spread up north, rustlers then drought. Wife went with the fever after." The words hung there, simple and raw, like bones picked clean. No self-pity, just fact. Eliza's throat tightened. She knew that kind of loss, the way it hollowed you out. "Sorry," she murmured, but he waved it off, eyes meeting hers with that same quiet intensity. "Life's a hard trail. You keep right." In that night, sleep came fitful, the bed too soft after years on hard ground. Dreams twisted through her mind, ropes tightening, hands grabbing, the endless horizon mocking her escape. She woke before dawn, heart racing, and slipped downstairs to the porch. The town was still, stars fading into a gray sky, the air crisp with the promise of heat. Jack was there already, leaning on the rail, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. Smoke curled lazy into the air, carrying the faint scent of tobacco. He offered her one without a word. She took it, the paper rough against her lips. They smoked in silence, watching the first light bleed over the mountains, turning the rocks to gold, but peace shattered with the rumble of wagons rolling in at sunup. Eliza froze on the porch steps, cigarette dropping from her fingers, the freighters the same ones who'd left her staked like bait. 3 men dust-caked and mean-eyed unloading crates at the general store. The leader, a burly man with a scar twisting his lip, spotted her first. His grin was slow, predatory. "Well, looky here," thought, "the buzzard's got you, girl." He spat tobacco juice, wiping his mouth with a grimy sleeve. "You're still mine, paid fair for you back in Abilene. Ain't done with what I bought." Her blood turned to ice, the world narrowing to the thud of her pulse. Jack stepped forward, hand resting casual on his hip near the revolver. "She's free now," he said, voice low but edged like a blade. The man laughed, a bark that echoed off the adobe fresque. "Cowboy, she's worth a meal to me, say your horse in gear, or we take her back." The others flanked him, hands twitching toward knives. Eliza's breath caught, the air thick with tension, dust swirling like a warning. Jack's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to her, then back. The choice hung there, heavy as the coming storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The street went still, the dust hanging in the air like a held breath. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs, each beat echoing the freighter's words. Worth. Emil. The phrase clawed at her, familiar as an old bruise. The leader's eyes raked over her, possessive and foul, while his cronies shifted, hands hovering near belts laden with knives and pistols. The town watched from doorways and windows, curtains twitching, faces pale but no one moved. This was frontier law, debts settled in blood or barter. No sheriff to call on in a spec like this. Jack stood unmoving, his shadow long in the morning light, hand still casual on his hip, but Eliza saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers flexed ever so slightly. The horse behind them nickered softly, oblivious, its saddlebags heavy with what little he owned, a bedroll, spare ammunition, a faded photograph tucked in his coat that she'd glimpsed once, of a woman with kind eyes. Everything. The words sank into her like lead. He could walk away, mount up and ride, leave her to the men who'd claimed her before. No one would blame him. Strangers didn't owe each other souls. But he didn't. Deal, Jack said, voice flat as the plains. The leader's grin widened. Tobacco, juice dribbling down his chin. Smart man, horse girl, all of it. And we ride out peaceful. Jack nodded once, sharp, and began unbuckling the saddle. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, but Eliza caught the tremor in his hands, the cost etched in the lines around his eyes. The saddle hit the dirt with a thud, followed by the bags, the rifle scabbard, even the canteen. He led the horse forward, reins loose in his grip, and handed them over without a word. The animal snorted, confused, as the freighter mounted clumsily, laughing with his men. Pleasure doing business, the leader called, tipping his hat mockingly, before they wheeled away, dust clouding their retreat. Eliza stood frozen, the world tilting under her feet. He'd given it all his way out, his protection for her, a girl worth one meal. The street stirred back to life, murmurs rippling like wind through grass, but she barely heard. Jack picked up what remained, his hat, the knife in his boot, the revolver at his belt, nothing else. He turned to her, gray eyes steady, but there was a rawness there now, exposed like a fresh wound. It's done, he said simply, as if trading his life away was just another chore. She followed him back into the boarding house, legs heavy, the air inside thick with the scent of coffee and regret. Mrs. Harlan glanced up from the counter, eyebrows raised, but said nothing, just poured 2 cups and left them alone in the dim parlor. Eliza sank into a chair, the wood creaking under her, and stared at her hand-scabbed wrists, dirt under the nails. Why? She whispered again, the question a thorn in her throat. You got nothing left now for what? Me. He sat across from her, cup steaming untouched in his hands. The light from the window slanted across his face, catching the silver in his stubble. Told you before ain't about worth. His voice was low, roughened by dust or emotion. Lost everything once already. Wife, land, the lot. Rode away, that was the end, but it ain't. You keep going or you die inside. He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw the vulnerability there, the man behind the cowboy mask. Saw you staked out, and it was like looking at myself tied down by what others say you're worth. Couldn't leave you to it. The words hung between them, heavy as the heat pressing against the windows. Eliza's chest tightened, memories surging, like a flash flood, the endless trades, the men who'd taken pieces of her until she felt like scraps. Trust was a luxury she'd forgotten, hope a fool's game. She could run now, slip out the back, disappear into the Badlands before he changed his mind or asked for payment in kind. Resist, keep the walls high, or risk it. Let this stranger's act crack the shell, allow the possibility of something more than survival outside. A wagon rattled by voices calling in the distance. The town moved on, indifferent as ever. But in the parlor, time slowed, the air charged with unspoken choices. Eliza reached across the table, her fingers brushing his tentative like testing thin ice. His hand closed around hers, warm and calloused, not grabbing but holding. A small gesture, but it sent a tremor through her, thawing the cold knot in her gut. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Days blurred into a rhythm at the boarding house. Eliza helped Mrs. Harlan with chore, scrubbing floors, mending linens, her hands growing steadier, the bruises fading to yellow. Jack stayed on, working, odd jobs, fixing fences for the livery, hauling water from the well. He didn't press, didn't demand. Evenings they'd sit on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the mesas, painting the sky in fiery streaks. He'd talk sometimes of cattle, drives under starlit skies, the feel of rain after drought. She'd share fragments, her mother's lullabies, the wildflowers that bloomed brief and bright in Kansas Springs. Vulnerability crept in slow, like dawn light, building trust from shared silences. But the crossroads loomed in her mind, a shadow she couldn't shake. One night, under a moon swollen and low, she found him by the corral, staring at the empty spot where his horse had been. I could go, she said, voice barely above the cricket song. You gave enough. Don't owe you in, he turned, eyes reflecting. The silver light ain't about owing, it's about choosing. The words echoed her own fears, and in that moment, she chose to risk hope, let the walls crumble. She stepped closer, her hand finding his again. The touch electric in the cool air. Weeks turned the town into something almost familiar, the adobe walls softening in Eliza's eyes like weathered hands. She woke each dawn to the crow of a distant rooster, the air cool and laced with the scent of pin and smoke from Mrs. Harlan's stove. Her body healed, slow bruises fading to ghosts, wrists scarring over in thin white lines, but the deeper wounds lingered, twitching like nerves under skin. Jack was a constant now, not pressing but present, splitting wood in the yard, his axe falling in steady rhythms that echoed her heartbeat, sharing coffee on the porch as the sun climbed, his silence a comfort rather than a void. She mended his shirts, fingers pricking on the needle, each stitch a tentative bridge between them. But adjustment came hard, like breaking a wild horse. Nights brought dreams of chains, of men with grasping hands, waking her sweat-soaked and gasping. She'd slip outside then, barefoot on the cool earth, staring at the stars that wheeled indifferent above. Was this real? Or just another trade? Subtler but no less binding. Jack never touched her beyond a brush of fingers, never demanded, yet doubt gnawed, fed by years of betrayal. One afternoon, as she hung laundry on the line, the wind snapping the sheets like gunfire, she watched him from afar haggling with the blacksmith for day work, his laugh low and rare. He caught her eye, waved, and something in her chest twisted, warmth warring with fear. The shift deepened in small moments, a shared meal where he spoke of his wife, voice cracking on her name Sarada, where she'd plant sunflowers by their cabin, bright against the prairie dust. Gone 5 years, he said, staring into his cup. Fever took her quick, left me hollow. Eliza reached then, her hand covering his, feeling the calluses, the pulse beneath. I know hollow, she murmured. Pass went coughing, Ma fevered too. Then, the men ... they took what was left. The words spilled out, halting at first, then rushing. The auctions, the beatings, the endless running in place. He listened, gray eyes steady, no pity but understanding. Like he'd walked that trail himself. Tension built as the land turned toward autumn, the air sharpening with the bite of coming frost. Whispers in town grew, folks eyeing them, wondering. At the cowboy who'd given his all for a stray girl. A rancher offered Jack work herding cattle north, a chance to rebuild, but he turned it down, saying he had roots here now. Elisa overheard, heart clenching. Was it for her? The weight pressed, making her restless. She wandered the dry wash one evening, boots crunching on gravel, the sky a bruise of purples and golds. Sagebrush scratched her skirts, releasing its sharp, clean scent. A jackrabbit bolted from the brush, vanishing into the shadows, and she envied its freedom. No ties, no debts. Back at the house, Jack waited on the steps, hat in hands, twisting the brim. "You've been quiet," he said, voice gentle as dusk. She stopped, the washer's chill clinging to her. "Ain't used to this," she admitted, arms wrapped tight around herself. "Kindness without strings makes me wait for the snap." He nodded, standing slow, close enough she smelled the sweat and leather on him. "I know Witten, but strings only if you tie him." His hand rose, hesitant, cupping her cheek. The touch was light, warm, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. She leaned in, eyes closing, risking the fall. That night, under quilts worn soft, they lay together, not in hunger but in quiet need. His arms around her were steady, a harbor after storm-tossed years, whispers in the dark, promises not spoken but felt, bodies mapping scars like constellations. Dawn found them tangled, the light filtering through curtains and golden shafts, dust motes dancing like blessings. But vulnerability brought its own storms. Days later, a letter came, faded envelope from Kansas, tracked down by some persistent kin. Her uncle, claiming inheritance, offering passage back. "Family," it read. "What's left of it?" The paper trembled in her hands, the crossroads reopening like a fresh grave. She showed Jack that evening, as thunder rumbled distant over the mountains, the air heavy with unshed rain. He read it silent, then folded it careful. "Your choice," he said, eyes on hers, hiding nothing, the fear of loss, the willingness to let go. "I gave what I did so you'd have that. Freedom ain't mine to keep." The word struck deep, echoing the rope snap, the trader's laughs. Resist or risk. Stay in this fragile new world, or flee to the known chains of blood ties. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, the lines of a man who'd lost and rebuilt. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady, drumming on the tin roof like fingers tapping in patience. Eliza stepped into it, face upturned, water washing away dust and doubt. Cold seeped through her dress, but she felt alive, choices clarifying in the downpour. Jack joined her, coat discarded, letting the rain soak him too. Their hands found each other, slick and sure. The rain tapered off as night fell, leaving the air washed clean, heavy with the scent of wet earth and petrichor rising from the parched ground. Eliza stood on the porch long after Jack had gone. Inside, her dress clinging damp to her skin, hair plastered in dark strands, the mountains loomed shadowy against the horizon, their peaks softened by mist, like ancient watchers finally at rest. Drops pattered from the eaves, a soft rhythm that mirrored the settling in her chest sphere, giving way to something quieter, more enduring. The letter from her uncle lay crumpled in her pocket, its promises of family and inheritance feeling distant now, like echoes from a life she'd outgrown. Kansas was chains disguised as blood. Here, in this raw edge of the world, was the chance to forge something new. Asterisk. Morning brought a sky streaked with pale light, the sun breaking through clouds in hesitant rays that gilded the puddles in the street. Eliza rose early, the boarding house creaking around her like an old friend. She found Jack in the yard, mending a fence with borrowed tools, his shirt sleeves rolled up, muscles corded from the work, sweat beaded on his brow. But he moved with purpose, each nail driven home a small act of permanence. She watched him a moment, heart swelling with the weight of her decision. No more running, no more trading pieces of herself for scraps of safety. She'd chosen hope, risky and real, over the hollow pull of the past. They rode out that afternoon on a borrowed horse from the livery, heading west toward a homestead Jack knew abandoned but salvageable, tucked in a valley where a creek ran year-round. The land unfolded gentle now, the storm's aftermath painting the scrub in vibrant greens, wildflowers nodding in the breeze like tentative welcomes. Eliza rode behind him, arms loose around his waist, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. Words weren't needed. The silence between them was full, woven from shared glances and the brush of hands. Her wrists, once raw from ropes, now rested easy. The scars a map of where she'd been, not where she was bound. The homestead appeared as the sun dipped low. A squat cabin of weathered logs, roof sagging but sturdy, flanked by a corral half-fallen and a patch of earth that could be tilled. Sagebrush whispered around it, and in the distance the creek murmured over stones, its water clear and cold. Jack dismounted, offering his hand, and she took it, stepping down into grass still damp from the rain. Inside, the air was musty, laced with dust and abandonment, but light slanted through cracked shutters, catching motes that danced like fireflies. He built a fire in the stone hearth, flames crackling to life, pushing back the chill. Eliza unpacked what little they had, blankets, a pot, the silver chain he'd worn, now hers to hold Dot as dusk deepened. They sat by the fire, the warmth seeping into bones, long cold. Jack's hand found hers, fingers intertwining, calluses against. "Scars will make it work," he said, voice low, not a promise but a truth. She nodded, leaning into him, the ache of years easing in his solidity. Outside, the wind rose gentle, carrying the scent of pine and distant thunder, but it no longer howled like a curse. Stars pricked the sky, vast and unyielding, yet tonight they seemed closer, like lanterns guiding rather than mocking. Eliza closed her eyes, the fire's glow flickering on her lids, and thought of that first day, the sun beating down, the dust choking her as she lay bound, worth one meal to the world. Now, in this quiet space, she was more, a woman reclaimed, resilient in the face of abandonment, redeemed not by grand gestures but by the steady choice to stay. The wind tugged at the cabin door, a soft sigh, and she smiled faintly, knowing the land's indifference had become a canvas for their rebirth. Smoke rose from the chimney, curling into the night like a prayer answered, thin and enduring against the endless dark.